Um, yes, I think the piece was quite old because they were referring to December dates, but it's in a thing called the Connector, and it's called "Why Isn't There a Peace Movement?" and how Palestine, Gaza, has been looked at purely in a polarized fashion. In other words, the Palestinians are all right, or Israel is all right, and how there hasn't been, what would you say? I guess you would say, what I would say is that on some level they're both right or they're both wrong, but let's start with both right because that's my predilection. It's a very interesting discourse and probably the only worthwhile one because the polarizing discussion is a dead end. I might suggest that it was a justifiable attack on October the 7th. Call it terrorism if you must, but acknowledge its Jewish revolt 65 AD antecedent, Boudica, Crazy Horse, the Maccabees, etc., ad infinitum. The acts of terror committed by an occupied or an oppressed people. And the response, to me, is also justified. Possibly, I would say, uniquely justified, given the history of Christian anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. So, in other words, if you wish, justified terrorism, an act of justified terrorism, and then an act of justified whatever you want to call it, genocide, etc. We all say there's no justification for terrorism, there's no justification for genocide, and then we go ahead and commit them anyway. So we should just drop the piety. The problem for me is the vampiric West that is so disturbing and polarizing with their tradition of colonial genocides that never had an ounce of the cumulative justification of Israel in Gaza. No emotional reason. Had, for instance, parentheses, a supremacist impossibility, the West collectively moved after Balfour that the Jewish people do what large numbers of moving into new lands should do, sometimes do in fact, negotiate, make deals and treaties, create platforms, integrate into the culture that you're moving into, and they integrate into you, etc., addressing and create platforms to address issues in the future. That would have been a thing. They did not. They being the West. They took the polarized position, invented a moral proxy, and armed them. It is a Western Christian tradition not only to conquer, but to stay, to settle. Our justification has always been to claim the claim of moral superiority, ever attached to a hidden racism. I agree with your point, only it isn't a simple choice. One is a grown-up position, the other, the polarized, is of a culture of children. We could all choose to grow up here, but don't dally waiting for the West to initiate something so alien to their adolescence. It's been 2,000 years of the rocking cradle vexing to nightmare. Islam and Judaism will have to do it themselves, and they can.